Welcome to our channel. Today, we're delving into an eye-opening topic that's crucial for American travelers in 2024. The top 10 countries where Americans are facing unwelcome mats. Whether due to strict travel bans, political tensions, or other factors, these destinations might not be on your travel itinerary this year. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss our latest travel updates. 1. North Korea. North Korea remains one of the most restricted and dangerous places for American travelers. The U.S. Department of State has a standing travel ban on all U.S. passports for travel to North Korea due to serious risks to safety and security. The country's political climate is highly volatile, and the government imposes strict control over visitors. Any American found in North Korea without special permission could face severe consequences, including imprisonment. The lack of diplomatic relations and the potential for arbitrary detentions make North Korea a no-go zone for Americans. The risks are not just theoretical. Several high-profile cases of Americans being detained and subjected to harsh treatment have been widely reported. The tragic case of Otto Warmbier, an American student who was arrested and later died after being detained in North Korea, underscores the severe risks involved. The North Korean regime's unpredictability and its antagonistic stance toward the United States further exacerbate the dangers. Traveling to North Korea involves significant restrictions. Tourists are only allowed to visit as part of guided tours, with little freedom to explore independently. The government controls all aspects of the visit, from the itinerary to the interactions with locals. This lack of autonomy, combined with the ever-present risk of political arrest, makes North Korea a highly unwelcoming destination for American travelers. 2. Iran. Iran is another country where Americans face significant travel challenges. Due to the strained diplomatic relations between the United States and Iran, travel to Iran is highly restricted and fraught with risks. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel," advisory for Iran, citing the risk of arbitrary arrest and detention of U.S. citizens. The political tension between the two nations has led to increased scrutiny of American visitors, and those who travel to Iran could face serious legal issues. The Iranian government has a history of detaining American citizens on charges of espionage or other politically motivated accusations. These detentions often occur without transparent legal proceedings, and detainees can be held for extended periods without access to proper legal representation or communication with family. The lack of an American diplomatic presence in Iran means that consular assistance is severely limited. Americans considering travel to Iran must also navigate a complex visa application process, which often involves extensive scrutiny and delays. Even if a visa is granted, the movement within the country is heavily monitored, and travelers must adhere to strict regulations. Given these challenges and the potential for significant legal and personal risks, Iran remains a highly unwelcoming destination for American travelers in 2024. 3. Venezuela. Venezuela's political and economic crisis has made it a dangerous destination for American travelers. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel," advisory for Venezuela due to crime, civil unrest, and the arbitrary arrest and detention of U.S. citizens. The country is experiencing severe shortages of food, medicine, and other basic necessities, which has led to widespread unrest and violence. American travelers in Venezuela face numerous risks, including violent crime, kidnapping, and extortion. The deteriorating infrastructure and lack of reliable public services further exacerbate these dangers. Additionally, the Venezuelan government has been hostile toward the United States, and there have been instances of Americans being detained on dubious charges. The economic instability in Venezuela also means that access to health care and emergency services is extremely limited. In the event of an emergency, the ability to receive timely and adequate medical care is significantly compromised. This lack of security, combined with the government's hostile stance toward American visitors, makes Venezuela a particularly unwelcoming destination. If you're finding this information helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to join our community of informed travelers. 4. Russia. Russia has become increasingly unwelcoming to American travelers due to heightened political tensions and security concerns. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel" advisory for Russia, citing risks of harassment, arbitrary detention, and the enforcement of discriminatory laws. The strained relations between the U.S. and Russia, particularly over geopolitical issues, have led to an environment where Americans are viewed with suspicion. American travelers in Russia may face increased scrutiny from law enforcement and security services. There have been reports of Americans being detained on charges of espionage or for violating local laws, often with limited access to legal representation. The Russian government's tight control over information and the judiciary system means that detainees can face prolonged detention periods without fair trials. Additionally, Russia has enacted laws that specifically target LGBTQ+ individuals and other minority groups, which poses significant risks for American travelers who fall into these categories. Public demonstrations and protests are also heavily regulated, and participation in such activities can lead to arrest and detention. The combination of legal risks, political hostility, and social discrimination makes Russia a highly challenging destination for American travelers. 5. Afghanistan. Afghanistan remains one of the most dangerous countries for American travelers. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel" advisory for Afghanistan due to crime, terrorism, civil unrest, and armed conflict. The security situation in Afghanistan is extremely volatile, with frequent terrorist attacks, kidnappings, and violent crime. The withdrawal of U.S. military forces and the takeover by the Taliban have further destabilized the region. American travelers in Afghanistan face significant risks of kidnapping and violence from terrorist groups and criminal organizations. The Taliban and other militant groups often target foreigners, and there is little to no infrastructure in place to ensure the safety of visitors. Additionally, the lack of a U.S. diplomatic presence severely limits the ability to provide consular assistance in emergencies. The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan has led to widespread shortages of food, water, and medical supplies, further exacerbating the risks for travelers. The country's infrastructure is in ruins, and access to healthcare and emergency services is extremely limited. Given these severe risks, Afghanistan is an extremely unwelcoming destination for American travelers in 2024. 6. Yemen. Yemen is another country where Americans are strongly advised not to travel due to the ongoing conflict and severe humanitarian crisis. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel" advisory for Yemen due to terrorism, civil unrest, health risks, kidnapping, and armed conflict. The country has been embroiled in a brutal civil war for several years, leading to widespread destruction and instability. American travelers in Yemen face a high risk of kidnapping by militant groups and criminal gangs. Terrorist organizations, such as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, and ISIS, are active in the region and often target Westerners for ransom or political leverage. The lack of a functioning government and the breakdown of law and order mean that there is no reliable security or emergency response. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen is among the worst in the world, with severe shortages of food, clean water, and medical supplies. Cholera outbreaks and other health emergencies are common, and access to healthcare is extremely limited. The ongoing conflict and dire humanitarian conditions make Yemen one of the most dangerous and unwelcoming destinations for American travelers. 7. Somalia. Somalia remains a highly dangerous destination for American travelers due to ongoing conflict, terrorism, and lawlessness. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel" advisory for Somalia, citing crime, terrorism, civil unrest, and health risks. The country has been plagued by decades of civil war, leading to a breakdown of government and security structures. American travelers in Somalia face significant risks from terrorist groups such as Al-Shabaab, which frequently carries out attacks against foreigners and government targets. Kidnapping for ransom is a common tactic used by militant groups, and Westerners are often targeted. The lack of effective law enforcement and the presence of numerous armed factions make Somalia an extremely volatile environment. Healthcare infrastructure in Somalia is virtually non-existent, and access to medical care is severely limited. The country also faces frequent outbreaks of diseases such as cholera and malaria, further compounding the risks for travelers. The combination of terrorism, crime, and lack of healthcare makes Somalia an extremely unwelcoming destination for American travelers in 2024.
8. Syria.
Syria remains one of the most dangerous places for Americans to travel due to the ongoing civil war and the presence of terrorist organizations. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel," advisory for Syria, citing terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. The war has led to widespread destruction, loss of life, and displacement of millions of people. American travelers in Syria face significant risks from terrorist groups such as ISIS and other militant factions. Kidnapping and violence against Westerners are common, and there is little to no infrastructure in place to ensure the safety of visitors. The Syrian government and various armed groups control different parts of the country, leading to a highly unstable and dangerous environment. The humanitarian crisis in Syria is severe, with widespread shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. Access to healthcare is extremely limited, and many medical facilities have been destroyed in the conflict. The ongoing war, presence of terrorist groups, and dire humanitarian conditions make Syria one of the most unwelcoming destinations for American travelers.
9. Belarus.
Belarus has become increasingly unwelcoming to American travelers due to political repression and strained diplomatic relations. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel," advisory for Belarus, citing the arbitrary enforcement of laws, risk of detention, and civil unrest. The country's political situation has deteriorated following the contested presidential elections and subsequent crackdown on dissent. American travelers in Belarus face significant risks of arbitrary detention and harassment by security forces. The Belarusian government has been known to target foreigners, particularly Americans, on dubious charges as a means of political leverage. Protests and demonstrations are met with heavy-handed responses from law enforcement, and participation in such activities can lead to arrest and detention. The strained relations between Belarus and the West mean that consular assistance for Americans is limited. The government's authoritarian stance and the crackdown on civil liberties create a hostile environment for American visitors. The political repression and risk of detention make Belarus a highly unwelcoming destination for American travelers.
10. Myanmar. Myanmar has become increasingly dangerous for American travelers due to the ongoing political and civil unrest following the military coup in 2021.
The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, "Do Not Travel," advisory for Myanmar, citing civil unrest, armed conflict, and the arbitrary enforcement of laws. The country is experiencing significant political instability and widespread violence. American travelers in Myanmar face risks of arbitrary detention, harassment by security forces, and violence from ongoing armed conflicts between the military and various ethnic groups. The government's crackdown on dissent and the targeting of foreign nationals further exacerbate these risks. The lack of reliable law enforcement and the presence of numerous armed factions create a highly unstable environment. Access to healthcare and emergency services in Myanmar is severely limited due to the ongoing conflict and the collapse of the healthcare system. The country's infrastructure has been significantly damaged, and many areas are inaccessible due to ongoing military operations. The combination of political instability, armed conflict, and lack of healthcare makes Myanmar an extremely unwelcoming destination for American travelers. Thank you for joining us on this important journey through the top 10 countries where Americans are facing unwelcome mats in 2024. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow travelers, and hit that subscribe button for more updates on global travel. Remember, by subscribing and clicking the bell icon, you'll stay informed about the ever-changing landscape of travel and the destinations that matter most to you.
Safe travels, and see you in the next video.